Hello everyone, welcome to an analysis of dance where we discuss the movements and debuts of the Billboard dance charts in immaculate detail with in-depth reviews of each debut each week. So one aspect that I pretty much completely missed out on was the fact that we would see one of the most unexpectedly busy runs on a lot of the charts this week, especially on Hot Dance due to some very unfortunate circumstances that we'll talk about later on. But besides that, the debuts were just weird, pretty much across the board here, and while there were some really welcome surprises for me, especially again on Hot Dance, which was really the most notable story this week, overall it was a pretty interesting and good week. Not going to complain that much. But let's not beat around the bush. Let's go to Hot Dance's top 10, which saw one of its biggest shakeups yet, and while obviously Dracula by Tame, Impala and JENNIE was going to hold that number one as it's pretty much just completely dominant, more on a specific version of the song that I'll talk about later on, that's not really what matters the most here. Nope, that comes in our big return at number 2 for Miss You by Robin Schulz and the now unfortunately passed Oliver Tree. Now I will admit I said some pretty harsh things about this song back in 2023 when it first charted, and I'm not magically going to change my thoughts on these now that we unfortunately don't have Oliver Tree around anymore. And for those of you who missed it, unfortunately Oliver Tree passed away far too young at 32 after a helicopter collision mid-air, which... God, what a horrifying way to go. I feel for him and everyone else who was on board that flight, including a big YouTuber from Argentina who, again, was somehow even younger. This is a really unfortunate situation. And while I can agree that the mainstream treatment that Robin Schulz got from this was really well deserved, because quite frankly his response to the whole thing was nothing short of embarrassing, and quite frankly plagiarism like this deserves to be really met with ridicule at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, this was ultimately down to remixing one of Oliver Tree's songs from his 2020 album, and quite frankly, as much as I've had some major issues with his run, especially after that album, and the quality just went downhill, I can at least acknowledge that he was one of the main artists that got me into alternative music back in the late 2010s. Some of his hits like Alien Boy and Hurt still really hold up for me, and even if I still think that this remix is not particularly good at all, if it's going to be one last final hurrah that probably won't last after the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'm at least willing to give some grace here. Major condolences to his friends, family and fans, and yeah, rest in peace. Kind of makes the rest of the top 10 a bit redundant in comparison, although thankfully for now at least knocked down No Broke Boys by Disco Lines and Tinashe to number 3, although let's be real, this is not going to last considering that the streaming is still rock solid for this one, and quite frankly it's only getting beaten now by a major tribute that probably won't last next week unfortunately. But the elephants in the room don't end at just Miss You, because we've got to talk about our number 4, Take Me by DANNY, and a whole number of stupid controversies regarding whether this song actually sampled and or stolen from a song that has been labeled as AI, with the context being that an AI producer had his song stolen from both DANNY and to a lesser extent Ian Asher, although in the latter case you can really not really drag him into this considering that it's a remix of a song that's already existed. It's not exactly something that can fall under copyright hell. And after reaching out to both artists, they blocked him. Quite frankly, it's a really telling sign that this is the major controversy here. Now, I could make a mention of the fact that this is an AI producer who's complaining about other people stealing his work and something that he hasn't actually made himself, using generative AI crap to make completely disposable slop like this, only for it to be, let's be real, remixed and not stolen by DANNY, considering that the beat in this version is completely different. And again, like I said with Ian Asher, he can get away with this quite considerably considering that it's a remix of DANNY's song, or the fact that blocking a producer thanks to some problematic stuff is not exactly the worst thing that can happen in this space. Trust me, there's far worse to worry about. But at the end of the day, there's no clear-cut evidence that this was actually stolen from that producer, and even if it was, the fact that DANNY and Ian Asher both made versions of it that are noticeably different and also happen to feature legitimate vocalists as far as I can tell, it's really indicative of people looking for any reason to jump onto any new sort of momentum at the moment. So my stance of it is going to be very similar to how I treat Moving to the Sun by Hugo, in that it's a remix of an AI song that's done with at least some credible arguments for real vocals, and quite frankly this feels like someone trying to leech off of the song's success and make it much worse than it actually is. But anyways, this unfortunately knocked down Go by the Chemical Brothers to number 5, although this was to be expected given that the sales were falling back and streaming has really gone downhill with this one. It's probably hit its peak globally. I'm not really surprised. Quite frankly, I'm amazed it got this high. Also the case for Free Your Mind by Prosper and Clooney at number 6, although this one will be just fine considering how huge it's surging up on streaming at the moment, including being in the top 10 of all genres in the UK. I can see that translating over to the US, and even if it did lose a little bit from the album, and ironically enough Dreams actually left the charts entirely from the top 10 debut last week, I think this will be just completely fine in my books. It's gonna stick around. Although it also opens up the door potentially for Like a Prayer by Josh Fawaz at number 7. Again, if you want something that's way more problematic, it's the enablement of lazy cash grab garbage like this, where it doesn't even appear that the vocals are actually legitimate. Quite frankly, I would not have a problem with this going away instead. Thankfully though, there's no rotation going away at any point for Talk to You by Another featuring 54 Ultra at number 8, which only fell a little bit because it just got beaten out on the margins thanks to Miss You, and it was going to get a boost from streaming anyways thanks to Witness, although unfortunately nothing else from that album charted despite it being a genuinely excellent project. It's worth hearing. But now on to our second top 10 arrival this week that I'm far less forgiving and interested in talking about, and it's something that I'm dreading having to see stick around, and that is DNA More Than Just a Game by Andrea, Bocelli, David Guetta, EJAE, and Megan Thee Stallion at number 9. Thanks to some sales and streaming thanks to its association with the FIFA World Cup, and if there's any indicative sign of how much FIFA has just fallen in my eyes, it's enabling this to chart. Spoilers for later on. Also yeah, fuck FIFA as an organisation. I think that needs to be said as well. Finally we get No Batty Dow by Zakai and Slaughter, unfortunately just sticking on at number 10, and I expect this will rebound because for some ungodly reason streaming is still on board with this. Can we move on to something that's actually good, or a scene that's not problematic to shit like Brazilian funk is? We can all do better than this. And the notes of frustration continues because our two notable fall-offs are songs that I genuinely love, and I am annoyed that they're actually gone. Although in the case of I Think I'm Addicted by Oscar Medkay and Haley Joel, it was going to leave anyways thanks to the 26-week rule, but it does suck that it's gone. It's a great track. Along with Just the Way You Are by Milky and More Grab. Thankfully it's actually sticking around on other channels besides just this, but unfortunately its rollercoaster run was going to end eventually. It's a real shame. And on the notes of disappointing, our sole notable fall this week was Worry by Lenone and Rise Race, plummeting down to 21, and it's not even thanks to the fact that there's versions of this song that are gone now, considering that the slowed version is back on streaming. It looks like people unfortunately just moved on from this. It's a real shame, but it's going to make the year-end list anyways. It looks like the two fall-offs. That's welcome for me. And on the much worse notes, when you get to our returns outside of Miss You in the top 10, the other one is Sad Girls by BB Rexa and David Guetta at 24, where this is just not really sticking around much at all, and considering that nothing else from BB Rexa's album actually debuted, I think we can call that another flop in her catalogue, and this song not sticking around past 2 weeks is really indicative of that. But what's more funny comes in our two jumps, where they're two debuts from last week, and arguably the weirdest ones of the lot, with Matrix by Crumb Crumb at 19, which really surprised me considering it's borderline unfinished and a fragment at best, and Meant to Be by Cunt Sniffer at 14. Although given what's come out about Spencer in the years since this song, and really the sort of things that have been resurfacing nowadays, I feel like this would probably be the only song of his that I'd be comfortable giving any sort of attention, especially considering he's not exactly the nicest person to put it lightly, even if I still do admit that I like this quite a bit. But thankfully things get way better when you get to our actual debuts here, starting off with a welcome surprise in number 25, Here With Me Now by It's Murph and Khalid. Cause I'm here with you now. Cause I'm here with you now. Oh, thank God tell that It's Murph still has enough momentum to actually chart in the States. Really, this is the sort of producer that I expected would actually stick around a lot more than he does. And while both Food for the Soul and Lost did reasonably well, they didn't stick around long enough to make the year-end list. More's a pity there. So just our luck that he's back with a new charting song with Khalid riding off of the remaining US relevance that he has that's actually built up a pretty decent bit since he came back into the dance scene. And given that the reviews have been really positive on this one, I was really looking forward to it. And yeah, this is great. I'm thrilled it managed to scrape on. Much more of a surprising pivot into a tech house sound, which is something that I didn't expect out of either artist. And while the verses are a lot closer towards the sort of Anjuna sounding production that you'd expect out of It's Murph and his stutter-house roots, the drops increase the volume and go for one of the grittiest and hardest production styles I've heard in recent memory, with the percussion particularly getting really intense and buzzy and sounding great to boot, all up against some really distorted and gritty synths and a great bass line. This sounds fantastic. And that's before Khalid, who actually gets chopped up to oblivion, where the stutter-house elements of It's Murph manage to shine through here too, and it sounds genuinely excellent. It's a great payoff. Now, I do wish that Khalid sounded a little bit more invested on the verses. He goes for more of that middle range that's nowhere near as strong as his lower soothing vocal range, and quite frankly, I do wish they tried a little bit harder here, but that's nitpicking considering the production is genuinely excellent. And if this is the means for both artists to get back into the mainstream at least for a little bit, I will definitely take it. This is genuinely great. Let's hope there's more to come for It's Murph. He deserves way better. Number 16, Do You Mind by Kyla and DJ Paleface. It feels like the club boom era has been getting a lot more revivals than I think anyone would have expected. I mean, between Perfect Exceeder and then Turn the Lights Off and now this, it's been really interesting to see what's blown up from that time, especially considering a lot of these weren't exactly small songs in the grander scheme of things. They had decent runs elsewhere, but not in the US. So now we get to Do You Mind, which most of you probably know thanks to its intense sampling on One Dance by Drake, where Kyla was given a #1 hit as a result. It's genuinely a song that I think gets a lot more hate than it deserves, and honestly compared to especially where Drake is nowadays, it's one of his better singles. So now with that in mind, it's interesting to look back at the original song, which actually got a viral moment thanks to the big remix with Crazy Cousinz, a name who I haven't really thought about in years, but has been one that's been doing decently well even on the UK dance charts as late as 2023, with songs like Plan B still being a staple of my playlist to this day. That song is excellent in particular. Now, given how much I really liked how Kyla was sampled on One Dance, I was really looking forward to this, and yeah, this original totally holds up. I might even like it more than One Dance. More of a faster dancehall groove with some really smooth percussion and that signature piano line that sounds terrific, all against Kyla, who's got the sort of playful, natural charisma that absolutely flows over this production with so much ease and personality. I can absolutely see why Drake sampled this song in the way he did on One Dance. It really fits into the more chilled, relaxed, and dance-heavy vibe of that song quite well, and especially compared to the original version, this remix really nails the percussion a lot better, going for much more of a timeless approach compared to that original track, which was definitely showing its budget at the time. And really, outside of that, there's not really a ton to say. It's a damn great song, arguably a classic in this sort of Afrobeat sound that this is going for, and I really am not complaining that Drake gave it a big revival and managed to actually get it to chart again now. And I'm definitely not complaining that it got a revival separate from Drake, especially considering where he is right now. I will definitely take the original article getting here. This is great, really glad it's actually here. Number 15, Genug by KitschKrieg mit Blumengarten and Shirin David. And on the topic of strange moments of virality, this one just completely caught me off guard. I think this genuinely might be the first song that's charted that's entirely in German in the US in a very long time, and surprisingly this and not Ball Up by Aberrantina, which you think would have gotten a bit of virality off of the back of its Eurovision run, but hey, I guess not. So for context, KitschKrieg and Blumengarten are a production duo who have scored some pretty decently big hits in Germany over the years, with KitschKrieg in particular getting several songs with over 100 million streams. He's not exactly a small name in Germany by any means. And Shirin David also having a pretty damn big run of her own rights as a German rapper who's, again, scored songs with over 100 million streams on her own. So really at this point, the fact that this blew up outside of Germany is genuinely interesting to me, where a lot of the virality is thanks to the repetitive hook, which when translated is "you are good enough." Geez, I wonder where that would have some resonance nowadays. And honestly, despite some mixed impressions on German rap that I've heard recently, this is surprisingly credible. I actually really like this. Think the most minimalistic side of the stutter-house movement with some really chopped vocal samples against the tappy beats, alongside some simple but effective melodies, and Shirin David going for this young Miko-style exaggerated vocal delivery, although with a slightly serious bend at certain points to highlight the self-love of the verses, where again, the hook translating to "you are good enough" absolutely fits in the context of the song. It sounds really damn good. It's a case where I can absolutely understand why TikTok really got on board with this outside of the German scene, and quite frankly, I would not have any problems with this actually sticking around. A message like this is definitely needed at this point, and given that everyone involved put in a pretty decent amount of work to make this sound good and actually be really interesting, you know what, I'll take it. This is actually a pretty damn good song. Wouldn't mind it sticking around. Number 9. DNA More Than a Game by Andrea Bocelli, David Guetta, EJAE, and Megan Thee Stallion.
This is more than just a game, it's our DNA.
Whereas with this, I was significantly less excited, and it really feels like you're just throwing a bunch of artists into a hat and pulling up whoever will decide to agree to a call. And quite frankly, the moment I saw David Guetta working with Andrea Bocelli, who is a classical singer who I've never particularly liked at any point, I just knew that this was going to be a disaster, especially when you tack on the oversinging of EJAE and Megan Thee Stallion, who would not make any sense anywhere near classical singers like Andrea Bocelli. And wow, even by my low, dead-on-arrival expectations with this is fucking awful. What a terrible song. For one, why the hell is the production here leaning on tropical house? Is this seriously something that David Guetta wanted to do in 2026? It doesn't even sound like a Kyla ripoff, but more of a Frank Walker ripoff. That's even worse. And quite frankly, this production is terrible. The fake-sounding bombastic piano that's trying way too hard and clips the front of the mix in the most unflattering way possible, all against the horribly smothered kicks and guitar licks that don't remotely stand out in the mix at all, and drops that are somehow quieter than the verses. That's basic amateur shit that David Guetta especially should know how to fix in 2026. What are you doing here? And it's not at all helped by the vocalist here, where Andrea Bocelli ditches his more signature operatic style for much more of a generic English-speaking vocal style that does not sound good at all. He's very clearly not comfortable on a mix like this, and why do you have to have him sing like this? It doesn't work for his voice at all. And then there's the oversinging of EJAE, as you'd expect, although she is at least trying a little bit more here. I at least prefer her vocals over Andrea Bocelli, and on that note, I prefer them over Megan Thee Stallion too, who once again absolutely proves why she should be nowhere near songs this bright. Seriously, her best songs are when she gets darker and nastier and goes for something a lot closer to a rock texture, not this cheesy, upbeat tropical house instrumental where she doesn't fit with her brash attitude at all. So yeah, this utterly blows while feeling like a really appropriate soundtrack to an organization that's become as corrupt as they can get, and quite frankly, it really soundtracks a World Cup where I have precisely zero interest in moving forward with it. And that's coming from an Australian who actually has seen them do decently well this year. So yeah, skip this crap. And on a note of things to skip, yep, we've got dance pop where absolutely nothing of interest happened at all, outside of Lemonade by aespa being replaced by Bring Your Love by Madonna and Sabrina Carpenter at 13, thanks to the fact that there are 2 remixes that are doing decently well and boosted its sales considerably. That's it, it's not gonna last either. And that same sense of nothing interesting happened on dance streaming too, although yes, there was the unfortunate and expected return of Miss You by Oliver Tree and Robin Schulz at number 7. Again, don't really expect this one to last, unfortunately. And on dance sales, it's notable too because Miss You came back there at number 6. Whatever. Although there were a few other notable returns alongside Miles on It by Marshmello and Kane Brown at 11 because people are really not interested in checking out any other Marshmello country EDM fusions. And seriously, that Kelsey Ballerini single that's coming out, I have precisely zero interest in listening to for my own sanity. But thankfully, alongside those, we had Bring Your Love by Madonna and Sabrina Carpenter returning to number 1. Again, those remixes we're going to do a pretty decent number for this one. And in our debuts, only one of them I've actually covered, unfortunately being DNA by Andrea, Bocelli, David Guetta, EJAE, and Megan Thee Stallion at number 3. Again, I don't expect this will last. Although the alternatives, they are certainly noticeable. Unfortunately, starting particularly rough with number 15, Inside My Soul by SK.music. I mean, seriously, anyone with a brain cell and eyes can tell you immediately that this is as blatant of an AI track as you can get. I mean, between the artwork, the obviously fake sounding instrumental, and the fact that one of the names credited on DSPs is literally generative AI, I think the case really rests for itself there. Honestly, I'm more surprised than anything that the artist is actually open about it. That's pretty rare to see in AI generated music nowadays, unfortunately. And it's worth noting because SK.music, as far as I can tell, is actually a genuine person. There's someone behind all of this who apparently did vocals here, at least on the female side, while everything else is blatantly AI generated, including the male vocals, which sound as fizzy and tinny as ever. And really at this point, I have no idea why I'm even giving this more attention. Kind of a shame too, because if this was made by an actual genuine person, it'd be halfway decent. There's an atmosphere here, I can at least absolutely see the appeal. But given that it's all made by a machine with next to no creative merit at all, and the fact that this scene is still getting stuff to charts on dance sales annoys the piss out of me, yeah, I cannot support this. It's an AI track, you know exactly what you're getting, skip it. Number 13, Dance the Night by Dua Lipa. I guess this is just as warranted after years of not being allowed to chart here. And anyone who remembers my old episodes of analysis of dance back in 2023 knows that I was not particularly happy that this didn't chart. It blatantly fits the chart. I have no idea why it didn't do so at the time. But I guess now, with time and retrospect and the fact that dance pop exists, this is now finally debuting for the first time in 2026 on dance sales, and all that for a pretty middling song by Dua Lipa standards. I mean, it's not bad by any means. I do like it quite a bit. It's got that signature string arrangement that does sound great against the much more funkier bass line, and it's one of the cleaner mixes in new disco that I've heard in recent memory, where Dua Lipa can absolutely flow over it with so much ease and charisma for one of the catchiest hooks of her career. But quite frankly, this song is really stock for her in terms of sound. It's nothing groundbreaking by any means, and she would prove on Radical Optimism that a lot of her material could get way more interesting than this did. And yes, I'll be one of the few people who still defends that album. I think it got way too much crap back in the day. I mean, it's still good, and I'm glad it's at least debuted somewhere. It gives me a reason to finally talk about it, but again, all of that for a song that's pretty middling by her standards. Just saying, she's got better songs. Number 10, Long Way Home by SAiiLOR.
Long way home, we ain't gotta go right now. Long way home, take another back road out.
But man, if the alternative is this, I will definitely take more Dua Lipa, because from what I saw of this guy, I was dreading this from the get-go. For context, SAiiLOR is part of that rising trend alongside artists like Ian Asher and Josh Fowers of making EDM covers of established songs, with his most notable remixes being of Maybe by Sienna Sparrow and I Know by Stella Lefley. Geez, talk about immaculate taste you have here. But this one seems to have caught in traffic as a fully original song that happens to also be a fusion of garage and country music. Dear God. And quite frankly, after Marshmello, I have no idea why producers are still trying to go down this route. It's clearly not working. This is not going to chart anywhere. And man, after hearing it, I completely get why, because holy crap, this is even worse than something like DNA. Because at least with that song, I can see some inoffensive arguments as to why people would actually find it decent. But with this, I've got nothing here, because the production and vocals vocals on this are fucking awful. I mean, the vocals already give off really shady vibes, and the fact that they sound so muddy and terribly mixed into the song, alongside some really artificial, grainy mixing style that makes me think that they're as AI as you can get, that was already bad enough. But on top of them sounding fucking terrible with the forced country twang and not fitting on this production at all, said production also just sounds terrible. I mean, seriously, the blend of the bass and the distant acoustic guitars against the much heavier garage sounding percussion, it creates one of the ugliest and least likable sounds that I've heard in recent memory, where the drops are flat awful and sound nowhere near as interesting as they could have, where somehow even Smoke the Pain Away had more cohesion between the country and EDM tones. What the fuck even is this? I mean, I can at least understand where the appeal would be for the remixes, even if they're not particularly good versions of the originals that they're bastardizing, but with this, it proves that this guy cannot make original songs to save his life, and quite frankly, if this is the only thing that he charts with, I think we'd all be better off for it, because holy crap, talk about atrocious, skip this crap. And finally, we got Warm Global Dance, which unfortunately wasn't particularly interesting this week, although at least it had some quality. I'll definitely take that. And yes, it does suck that Talk to You by Another featuring 54 Ultra just barely missed out on that 1000 spin reach, but it's still a number one. It's still got a decent lead, even if the margins are closing with it. And that's probably not really going to go back to New Religion by BB Rexa and Faithless at number 2, even if the album did give it at least a little bit more curiosity spins than I think it deserved. But unfortunately, I see the number 1 going to Satisfy by Calvin Harris and Jazzy at number 3, which unfortunately looks like it's actually sticking around on radio despite being flat garbage. I really hope it stalls out fast. It's got no reason being this high. I mean, not really like anything else could be a surprise and surge past it, even including Free Your Mind by Prosper and Clooney at number 4. Again, the album curiosity spins were not going to last with this one. Or Favor by Fisher and Tones and I exiting naturally at number 5. Or Magnetic by the Bowser at number 6, which unfortunately is just stalling out really fast, even if it is still doing quite well in Europe on other formats. Or even Moving to the Sun by Hugo Lamal Angel and Alternate at number 7, which is just way too new to actually get there. And given the whole controversy, I could see some stations maybe pulling out playing this for the moment. Then there's Save Me Tonight by Jennifer Lopez and David Guetta at number 8, which is really riding off the back of David Guetta's name despite the fact that the song has been abandoned months ago. Gross. Followed by Zone by MK featuring Poppy Bascom at number 9, which is just refusing to have an interesting run, much like the song itself being interesting. And then there's fucking Jamaican Bam Bam by Hugo and Salto at number 10. If there's any indication as to why this is actually still sticking around on radio despite Moving to the Sun being better and higher than it, I really need some explanation here, because I do not get it at all. What is ironic is when you get to our fall-offs, a lot of these seem to be mostly new songs, although there were at least a few casualties that were a little bit older, such as Think About Us by Sony Federa, DOD and Poppy Bascom, and even Bad Angel by Anima and Lisa, kind of revealing that the other Anima song is doing way better, but we'll get to that later on. And that same irony continues into our falls, where most of the songs here fall under that category, most notably Serotonin by James Hyper 24. I mean, I get it, it's Be Mine again, but somehow even less developed and worse across the board, but you'd still think it would stick around a little bit. But man, I cannot really complain about our other falls, starting with Acting Tough by Dean Turnley at 17 right off the top 10 last week, and then there's I Can't Wait by Bob Sinclair and Keezer at 20, and Save My Love by Kygo, Khalid and Griffin at 27. Not really complaining about either of these leaving at this point. As for our comebacks, again, that irony translates here, because why the hell is Blessings by Calvin Harris featuring Clementine Douglas at 39? I get that it's summer and the song does appeal there, but it came out over a year ago. We can move on from this. And same deal with Don't Want to Go Home by MEDUZA featuring Henry Chamomile at 36, especially considering that MEDUZA has a much higher debut that's likely to take attention away. Why the hell is this back? And also, we had 4 jumps this week, where ironically one of them was Just The Way You Are by Milky and Wargrab, rebounding off of its loss of last week to 19, while the David Guetta remix that's newer doesn't end up sticking around much at all. Yeah, interesting there. Thankfully, the other 3 jumps I'm completely okay with Closure by DOD featuring Hayley May at 11, alongside Girl by Jonas Blue at 13, and ironically, Beautiful by Nima and Joji at number 12. Really revealing that this is a song that's sticking around on radio despite doing far worse on the main charts. That's kind of interesting. But where I'm not particularly happy comes in our first of our 2 debuts here. Unfortunately being number 40, Dracula Boys Noize Disco remix by Tame, Impala and JENNIE. I'm gonna just keep this one short because seriously, what do you want me to really say about this? It's Boys Noize going down their single worst subgenre pivot in recent memory for something closer to new disco. And after Getaway, I thought we all knew that they should stay the hell away from that scene. It does nothing for them. And it couldn't even be a flip of the really good original track. Instead, it had to be a remix of the JENNIE version because that's the one that's blowing up at the moment and you need a quick buck. And quite frankly, this is nowhere near as good as the original. Hell, I might prefer the JENNIE remix original over this. It sucks. The disco production sounds about as flat and uninteresting as ever, where my most modern comparison is probably Purple Disco Machine's recent material, which is not a good thing. That guy's fall off has been really worrying to see. And when you're remixing the bad version of Dracula, where JENNIE's verse sounds as completely out of place and forced as ever, it just has me wondering why the hell dance radio is embracing this version. I mean, it's not like the original would not fit on this format, and quite frankly, it smokes both versions with JENNIE on them. So yeah, you can skip this, it's not good. And finally, number 22, Silence by MEDUZA and RANI. Thank God at least that one of the big debuts this week actually had some interesting stuff to talk about. And hey, would you look at that? MEDUZA's actually showing that they're genuinely sticking around again. Shame it's not on the main chart, but hey, I'll take what I can get. And while I did mostly like Don't Wanna Go Home, I was at least interested about this one, even if the expectations were a little bit lower thanks to RANI's track record, which hasn't been great. And yeah, unfortunately it's not great, but it is at least decent, I'll give it that. More than anything, my first impression hearing this was that this sounded like John Summit trying to replicate one of David Guetta's big sample house hits without any actual sample of notes. And really, again, it's proven that a lot of the producers going for John Summit sound are doing way better than he is nowadays between the Chainsmokers and now this. And honestly, the production here is a lot better than I expected, where it's going for much more of that chillier house vibe, with MEDUZA's signature sounding synths that blast through on the pre-chorus, alongside some prog touches that on the verses sound really good, especially with RANI actually delivering a decent vocal performance, even despite the overabundance of vocal effects that she didn't really need. Although, yeah, the drops do feel a bit too flat for me, especially with the lack of bass. It does get distracting. I mean, overall, it's not bad. I can definitely understand why it debuted so high, and I can see this having the hook to really stick around, but for me, it's not up to level their best. Pretty good, but not great. And after all that, man, you've got a really mixed week across the board, where the best and worst honestly fell out pretty easily for me. I mean, best is obviously going to Here With Me Now by It's Murph and Khalid. That song was pretty much guaranteed to get that. But you know what? Do You Mind by Kyla and DJ Paleface, remixed by Crazy Cousinz, was actually really damn close behind it. It's a pretty damn good honourable runner-up. I'm glad it's actually here. As for worst, man, I could have easily picked either of the 2 bottom spots here. And while DNA More Than Just a Game by Andrea, Bocelli, David Guetta, EJAE, and Megan Thee Stallion is getting Dishonourable runner-up for really being a bastardization of 2 producers who are much better than this guy ever will be. It's not the worst here because Long Way Home by SAiiLOR just absolutely pissed the absolute hell out of me. Quite frankly, it runs away with the worst of the week on the back of being one of the worst produced songs I've heard in recent memory. This guy can go away for all I care. Next week, I've really not got much that I would expect to debut. Could be a quieter week, and at least for me that would be welcome, especially if there's some surprises that could take over and be completely unexpected. But yeah, that's all for this episode of an analysis of dance. See you next time.